All right, welcome back, my friends. We are going to now address diamond mining. Where do we find diamonds and how can we find more diamonds? Just a reminder, this is where we are. We're actually not talking about simulants. We're just talking about diamond mining today. And starting on Tuesday of next week, we will start our midterm. And so on Tuesday for lecture, we will be doing a catch-up review. We'll do a small activity to try to put some things back into your mind and solidify some ideas in your mind that will be very helpful for the midterm. All right. So, and of course, here's all the information about the midterm. I talked about it in the last recording, so I'm not going to talk about it again. All right, let's talk about the diamond mining. Okay, what are our key points? Key points are diamond-bearing kimberlites are only found on the cratons, and you'll remember the cratons are the oldest, most stable continental crust. Oldest, coldest, least moving around. Each diamond producing pipe or area has somewhat unique diamond characteristics. And interestingly, consolidating mining interests under one company has had both good and bad effects. So it's kind of an interesting thing, and we'll tell that story. All right, you'll remember this particular situation here where we've got diamonds being found in a number of different places around the world. Africa is extremely well blessed with diamonds, as is Asia, most notably Russian Asia. And Brazil has a few. North America does in Canada, not very many other places. And while there are some in Australia, we're going to discover that none of them are producing right now. All right, let's see if it's going to let me move on. Hello. Okay, there we go. So let's start with the very oldest diamonds. We talked about these briefly. We talked about how historical diamonds were found in river gravels, and they were guarded by griffins, is the way it was put in some historical documents. And because they found some absolutely beautiful, sensational diamonds from an area called Golconda, that became the industry term for exceptional diamonds. Now, it's not much used today, I will say that. Really not very often used. But if you find it in older references, you will see Golconda diamonds are exceptional and absolutely beautiful. In India today, mostly there's not a lot of diamonds being found. Mostly it is considered what is artisanal mining rather than large scale mining. And in 2016, only 835 carats were reported mined. Now, there may have been more than that, but this is what's being reported to the government. And there's only one industrial diamond mine, but as much as I can look and find things, I can't tell if it's actually still in operation. So there's very little diamond mining happening in India today. One of the famous ones is the Kohinoor. And it was first cut to be 191 carats. And then when Queen Victoria was gifted it, she had it recut to 105 carats. And this is one of the most famous ones from this area. Borneo was the next place that we know of historic diamonds being from. Diamond mining's been there in alluvium from about 600 AD. And often the Borneo diamonds are kind of green skinned. They have that extra amount of green on them. And as you remember, we talked about when we talked about diamond color, that green is because of natural irradiation. Um, there's just a few places where they were mined back, in ancient times, and there's really only minimal mining there today. And more mining didn't really start to be developed before we discovered kimberlite pipes. And we decided that we wouldn't be looking for mining in the old places. We would actually look for mines in new areas, given what we understood about kimberlite pipes. So, where it all starts, we told the story about the poor De Beers brothers, okay? And how the De Beers brothers had diamonds on their land, and they were 100% not interested in having diamonds on their land. They would really have preferred to just keep farming the land and living a kind of a peaceful life. So they end up selling out. So in 1971, the De Beers brother had just like a regular old mine. That's when the first diamonds are found on their farm. And then by 1872, we end up with 50,000 people digging in that area, their farm and the surrounding farms. And this is 50,000 diggers. There were probably at least that many other people there. So I want you to think of what a farmland looks like, and I want you to think about what that might look like. And then I want you to see what it looked like just 1 year later. These are the Kimberly mines 1 year after diamonds were found. So you can imagine that the De Beers brothers were not thrilled by this situation. And this is the interesting thing. People would have mining claims, but they would only have a very small area that was theirs, that it was a place that they actually got to mine, and none of the other areas around it were theirs. They were owned by someone else. But how do you mine straight down when you can't even get to your mine? What if your mine was over here? And how are you going to get there? And people aren't going to let you walk across their mine. And look at these holes that are in the side. This is how they would get down to the lower places where they could start mining more. It is insane to think about. So basically, here's what another perspective of the big hole that used to be the De Beers Brothers farm looked like. So here's this big hole, and it is just crisscrossed with zip lines. Okay, probably not very safe zip lines, but zip lines, because that would be the only way. If this was your claim right here, you couldn't get there from over here where, like, I don't know, there's like food and water and a place to sleep or whatever, unless you had a zip line. Also, the zip lines were used to remove the stuff that you were digging out. So because you couldn't just throw it over the next person's because they'd get mad at you. This did not last for very long. It lasted for a while, and it was a really wild place. But by 1888, pretty much all of the mines had been consolidated into one large company. And this one large company has a name that was taken from the area, and it is called De Beers. And this is probably the most famous diamond company in history, is the De Beers Mining Company. Um, this is what that big hole looks like now. All right. So it closed in 1914. They literally pulled out 3,000 kilograms of diamond in that time period, which comes to about 14.5 million carats. Now, just because the big hole, and they dug down deep enough that now it's filled with like groundwater and stuff like that. And it is fenced off. It doesn't look like it's fenced off, but it is fenced off. People are safe if they're living over here or whatever. But mining continues in this region, okay? Even after, 150 years, economic diamond mining continues. And you can see some of these different pipes that they are doing the same thing that they did with the main big hole Kimberly pipe. Now, it's interesting. There's some different things you have to be worried about when you think about like picking stuff up out of a riverbed, out of alluvial gravel, and when you're doing like actually open pit mining, which is what this is called. Open pit mining is actually kind of a dangerous process. There's a lot of political oversight to it. You can't just start digging somewhere. This is the Mere Diamond mine. This is the second largest man-made open pit in the world. Anybody know where the first biggest, the largest? It's the Kennecott copper mine here in Utah, just west of Salt Lake Valley. That is the largest man-made open pit in the world. Kind of fun. But anyway, here's the Mere Diamond Mine. And to be able to do this, you have got to have like all the right permitting and everything. Then you have to remove everything and process it and sort it, looking for those diamonds. And then you blast things, and then you remove the stuff you just blasted, and then you process and sort it, and then you blast again, and then you process and sort it. And by that way, this is the way you're going to actually start getting diamonds out of these open pit mines. The diamond processing, well, first of all, I love this type of a picture. So this is the Mere Diamond Pit again. And this is showing you the size of the dump trucks that are bringing that broken up material up to the surface to be processed. And this is showing you how small this giant vehicle is. And this is next to a full-size Suburban. So kind of insane how large these are. And if you want an experience to actually go and like stand next to some of these things, if you go up to the Kennecott Copper Visitor Center, they actually have some of those big, big wheels, those big tires, and you can stand next to them and say, "Oh, look how big this is," kind of a thing. So what do you do with all of that stuff that you just dug up? Well, you have to process it. And the way you process it is you break it down and you put it through a number of different concentrators. So basically, you dump the stuff in there and that's into the feed hopper, okay? And then you let it go through a feed belt. And this feed belt kind of makes it so that there's not a lot going through. It kind of organizes it into a line of material. And then that material actually goes through here and it goes past an X-ray source. That X-ray source actually, if it hits a diamond, it actually sends a different type of a signal over to this photomultiplier tube, which then triggers this air jet to toss the diamond into a different bin. And that's literally how you can you can separate the diamonds from the rocks you don't care about. Now, this says waste bin. It's not a waste bin. It goes into another feed hopper that does the same thing because this is not 100% accurate. And so you will actually be going through your waste rock again and again and again and again and again. And then sometimes what they'll do is they'll actually take a table and smear it with Vaseline. And then they'll pass the diamond concentrate over that table. And it turns out the diamonds actually want to stick with the Vaseline. And so they will stick more to the Vaseline and then you can pick out whatever is left. Kind of a wild thing. Now, this diamond processing, this I'm showing you next to an open pit mine. But that doesn't mean this is the only place that this type of diamond processing happens. And I want to introduce you to diamond mining in the African country of Namibia. Now, Namibia, and look at this particular in the top right corner. This is showing you here is South Africa, and here is Namibia. And it turns out that South Africa is a higher elevation than Namibia. So all of, not all of them, but a lot of the rivers that drain from South Africa actually end up in Namibia. And so what happens is that through millions and millions of years, there has been erosion of these kimberlite pipes that we said are in these areas. And that erosion means that there have been diamonds in the rivers for a very long time, and they're getting carried out to the sea. So not only are there diamonds in these river gravels that come through Namibia, but there's also tons and tons of diamonds being dumped into the Atlantic Ocean. All right, so when these were first found, primarily off the coastline and on the coastline with the sand, this sand actually ends up having diamonds in it. So basically, people were like, wow, we can find diamonds in Namibia, even though we don't have any evidence of kimberlite pipes in Namibia. So over 90 million years, they're transported through erosion and deposition into the beaches and just offshore of this very desolate part of the continent. This is actually called the Skeleton Coast, and it is really well known for having a lot of shipwrecks. So it's kind of a dangerous place. And then if you get up onto the land, it's complete desert. So it's kind of not a great place to have to be shipwrecked. Back in the day, this is one of my favorite pictures of all time. What they would literally do is they would go out into these sand dunes by the beaches and they would crawl around on their hands and knees and they would pick up diamonds out of the sand that was there. And how would they be able to tell? Well, they would be able to tell because diamonds are shinier. They have more reflection. And so that would be how you would tell. But literally, they are out there with tweezers and their fingers and they're picking them out. What a tedious, tedious job. But man, it was worth it for them because they actually made some pretty good money. Now, what they do is they actually have these big offshore drilling rigs, pumping rigs. They pump the sand up. They do that as many separations as they can, and then they dump the sand back into the water that now it doesn't have any diamonds in it. So that's the kind of diamond mining you can have in Namibia. So there's a number of different ways to mine diamonds, and this is an alluvial diamond way of mining alluvial diamonds. Let's talk about what other diamonds we find in Africa. So we've talked about South Africa and Namibia, Lesotho. Remember, we talked about the really big diamonds they find in Lesotho. They also find diamonds in Ghana. They're typically not very exciting. Sorry, Ghana. They're very small. They're mostly dark and industrial, and they're just honestly, they're the size of a pinhead, too small to facet. Now, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, they do have kimberlite pipes and they do find diamonds there. However, most of the diamonds from this area are, again, pretty industrial, cubes with opaque coatings on them and things like that. And when they find them in the alluvium, so then they also so they're doing the kimberlite pipes, but they're also finding them in the rivers in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. They're higher quality. And the reason why they're higher quality is they've been moved over millions of years through the rivers. Anything that is wrong with the diamond, it could hit another diamond and cleave if there is some kind of a fracture, some kind of an inclusion or something like that. And that means that the ones you get out of the alluvium typically are a little smaller, but higher quality. Okay. And it's actually backbreaking work. So this is a picture from Time in 2015 where they are literally hunched over this water trying to find diamonds, and they only get paid if they find a diamond, which is crappy. That's a terrible way to do things. Botswana has diamonds. It is actually the second largest diamond producing country in the entire world, um, according to 2020. May have shifted a little bit. Very large kimberlite pipes. And this particular diamond, this is called the Motswedi diamond. It was found in August of 2024, and it is not as big as the Cullinan. Remember, the Cullinan is 3,100 carats. This is 2,500 carats almost. But isn't that beautiful? Now, what kind of a diamond is that? It's a super deep diamond. Look at how it's irregular. Look at how it's resorbed. Look at how it is. I mean, it looks like those clipper diamonds, those super deep clipper diamonds. Tanzania also has diamonds. The biggest diamond, kimberlite pipe. So the biggest kimberlite pipe that actually had diamonds that you could mine is in Tanzania. It's like 150, 146 kilometers squared. It's giant. Most kimberlite pipes are much, much, much smaller than that. There's a particular mine called the Williamson mine in Tanzania. Early, the high grade stuff that was coming out of there, they were finding like 62 carats for 100 tons. And so they were making so much money, and they were finding some absolutely beautiful bubblegum pink diamonds. And one of them was gifted to then Princess Elizabeth before she ascended to the throne. And it was called the finest pink diamond in the world. And this is she had it set into a brooch. Now they've dug through all of the really rich stuff, and now they're getting more like 6 carats for every 100 tons. So it is kind of getting there where it's almost getting uneconomic. It's not there yet, but it's getting to the point where it's less economic. All right, so those are the places we find diamonds in Africa. Let's move on to another continent. And we aren't going to be talking very much about Australia, except even though Australia doesn't have any active mines right now, it still was home to one of the most famous diamond mines of the 20th century, and that's the Argyle mine. And the Argyle mine had these absolutely beautiful purples and pinks and reds. Remember, I showed those to you a little while ago. The problem with the Argyle mine is it's not a kimberlite at all. It's what we call a lamproite. Now, remember that geologists are splitting things up based on some chemical things. Essentially, a lamproite is a kimberlite, but it has slightly different chemicals in it. But it's coming from the same place. It's coming from the deep lithospheric mantle. But the other weird thing about this one is it's not on the Archean craton. Remember how we talked about you needed to be on the craton? This is not on the very oldest parts of the craton. This is on the slightly younger. And what I mean by slightly younger is maybe it is 4 billion years old instead of 4.1 billion. Actually, it's probably more like 3.8 or something like that. But anyway, it's slightly younger. And we call those the mobile zones because they were mobile more recently. They had tectonic activity more recently. The Argyle mine was the single largest producer of diamonds in the 90s. and most of them are pretty heavily included. I want you to look at this little guy. He's about 1.5 carats. He is the Argyle Phoenix. It's one of the most beautifully colored, deep pink, almost, I'd call it a red. Um, and it sold for $1.3 million a carat. But can you see the inclusions? They're everywhere. The inclusions are all over the place. And so, despite the inclusions, this is still a very valuable diamond because of its gorgeous color. And we talked about how the Argyle mine closed and they have now rehabilitated the whole area. Let's move on up. Let's move on up to Russia. Oh, I was going to have you watch a video, but apparently it is not working. But anyway, it was just a video of showing you some cool diamonds from Russia. Russia has the largest diamond reserves in the world. Okay, that means that they've pulled diamonds out or that they know where diamonds are, and they have more of that than anybody else. Okay, they're the largest producer by volume. In 2018, Russian diamonds accounted for 33% of all diamonds being sold on the market. Unfortunately, in Russia, it is not the safest profession. Now, mining rarely is the safest profession, even in the United States. But in Russia, they're kind of plagued by fatal mine events. Sometimes they ask for help from outside experts. Sometimes we never hear about it until like 10 years later, and we hear that they lost 100 men in this mine or 150 men in this other mine. So it's a dangerous job, especially in Russia, but it can be a pretty lucrative job. Let's see if this is going to let me move on. There we go. Now, there's two main parts of in Russia, two main areas where we find diamonds, and one of them is in Yakutia, which is basically Siberia, and that's on the Asian continent, and it's out here. Here is Japan, the Pacific Ocean, the Arctic, stuff like that. And the ones that are in Yakutia, they're Anarchean craton. They're very high grade ore, and there's a lot of mines there. There's 12 active mines in this area. So this is a fabulous place. Very, very cold, very, very hard to work in, but very lucrative. And then you come over here to the Archangel area, which is right up here by the Kola Peninsula. Here is Scandinavia and Europe. And this is actually in the Russian continent. I mean, sorry, in the European continent. So this is in the Yakutia ones are in Asia, and the Archangels are in Europe. And this is another weird one, okay? It is also not on the Archean craton. It is on those outside mobile zones that are just slightly younger, just like the Argyle mine. And the really interesting thing about that is both of them produced a lot of pink diamonds. So here are some of the gorgeous, gorgeous pink diamonds. And so you start to think, is that related? Remember, pink may come from hydrogen impurities, but it also may come from plastic deformation. And because of that, perhaps the fact that they have been a little bit more mobile, because we call it the mobile zone, then maybe this is why we get pink diamonds from that area. Let's hop on over to the United States. Okay, so diamonds in the United States. In our country, there are only really two places in the world where we have found diamonds. Now, there have been random diamonds found in other places. Like there have been diamonds found in California, like I think two. And we have no idea where they came from. And we have found some in like North Carolina or something like that. And we have no idea where they came from. You know, they came from somewhere, but we can't find it anymore. So it's probably eroded away. But the two famous ones are Arkansas, the crater of Diamond State Park. And if I were in the classroom, I'd be asking, who's been there? I have never been there. I am so going to be there someday. But I don't want to take my kids because they would get bored too fast. This is actually the world's only diamond bearing site accessible to the public. You pay a small fee, it's a state park, and you go in there and you can dig up and dig all day, and whatever you find, you keep. Now, most of the time people don't find anything, but every so often you'll hear about somebody who finds something way cool. Now, the interesting thing about the Arkansas Crater of Diamonds site is it's not a kimberlite. Again, this is not a kimberlite. This is a lamproite, like the Argyle mine, and it has a lot of brown diamonds. They don't really find a lot of pinks. They find a lot of browns and yellows. It's not economic. People have tried before they gave it to the state to be a state park. There were corporations who were trying to make it work as a diamond mine, and it's just such low grade. But they go out there, periodically. The state rangers, the state park rangers, go out there with big earth moving equipment and turn everything over again so that maybe you can find something. And apparently, it's really fun. The other place, this was a big deal when I was first starting college, was the diamonds found in Colorado, and then there was also some thought that there would be in Wyoming as well. And these are called the Kelsey Lake diamonds. They found kimberlites, and they're like, "Oh, kimberlites! We have found kimberlites, therefore let's find diamonds." And they did find diamonds. Unfortunately, the diamonds they found were it's less than 4 carats per 100 tons. It's just not economic, especially in the United States. You have to remember that when you are talking about mining in a developed nation, there are more rules, and that means it's going to be more expensive. You have to be more environmentally aware. You have to have lots of health and safety standards in place. You have to pay your workers a living wage. You can't just make them work, and if they find a diamond, maybe they get paid. All of those things contribute to making it so that if a kimberlite pipe is found in the United States, it has to be extremely high grade to be able to overcome all of those other expenses to being able to get to it. However, there's not a whole lot of kimberlites in the United States. They do exist, but there's not a ton. So just to show you, here's some of the typical diamonds that are found in Arkansas. And then here is also the one that is called the Con Canary diamond. And this is actually the shape that it is. It's very resorbed. They didn't cut it, and they set it in this really crazy ring. And Hillary Rodham Clinton actually wore this to her husband's first inaugural. Somebody lent it to her to wear because it's from Arkansas, and that's where he was governor. So kind of a little bit of history there. Well, let's talk about kimberlites. Let's talk about where we find kimberlites, and let's start talking about the most recent, really successful diamond discovery in Canada. All right, so first we're going to start by looking at this map of all the kimberlite occurrences in the world. So all of the dots, black or red, are kimberlite occurrences, and the red ones are ones that we know their ages for. So that's okay, whatever. We don't really care. And you can see that actually the United States has a fair amount. Guess what? None of them are diamond bearing, at least not good enough for us. There's one down here in Antarctica. Do you think that's the only one in Antarctica? Almost definitely not. Okay, because Antarctica is covered with ice, so we won't know if there's more under there unless the ice melts, right? So lots and lots and lots of kimberlites in the world. So with all these kimberlites, you know you want to find kimberlites, but how else are you going to find the ones that have the diamonds? So let's talk about this again. Now we're going to bring this up once more. We're going to talk about our lithospheric craton. Remember, the craton is what we call the stuff on top. And underneath it, it has what's known as the mantle keel. You talked about that. We talked about that briefly. And you'll see that that's where the diamond stability field is actually there. I mean, it's actually able to have diamonds forming there. But even when you're on the craton and you have kimberlites coming up, that doesn't mean that you're going to have diamonds. Most kimberlites have no diamonds, or they have too few to be able to mine. So why is that? Why are most don't have diamonds? Well, the answer is you got to be able to have the diamonds where the kimberlite is coming up. So I want you to think about something. Well, I want you to imagine something. As soon as we figured out where kimberlites were, a lot of scientists went into these areas and said, hey, I want to try to figure out how to find more kimberlites. And so soon enough, everybody was finding kimberlites all over the place. Look at how many are in South Africa. They were finding them everywhere, but then they were realizing that not every single one of them would actually have diamonds. And they're like, well, how are we going to be able to tell which ones have diamonds? So this gentleman by the name of Clifford spent a lot of time in the 50s and the 60s trying to look at the economic resources of the southern part of the African continent. And he discovered that every time there was a diamond bearing a diamondiferous kimberlite pipe, that was on the oldest, coldest part of the craton. So the craton has a lot of area, right? And so, like, here's the Proterozoic mobile zone, and here's the most Archean part, but all of this part is the Craton. As soon as he realized that, he formulated a rule, and that rule is called Clifford's Rule. Clifford's Rule says that kimberlites that erupt through the oldest, coldest part, the oldest, most stable, the part that is called the Archean. Now, what does Archean mean? Let's go back for just a second. Archean is actually just the very oldest crust that we have. It's anything that, oh, I was telling you 3 billion years. I was wrong. I forget when some things start in the past. So it's got to be older than 2.5 billion years. And then we have parts of the craton that are 2.5 to 1.5 billion years. He noticed that the best diamondiferous pipes are always on the Archean craton. So he's like, well, let's make a rule. The kimberlites that erupt through the oldest Archean part of the craton will be diamondiferous. And kimberlites that are anywhere else aren't likely to yield diamonds. Now, this is a rule. This is not a fact, okay? There are exceptions to this rule, but those exceptions to the rule are few and far between. Now, what I'd like you to do is I want you to think about what that means. So let's look at this picture right here. In this picture, it's showing you a cutaway of, say, part of this map over here. We're in Canada. All right. And we're saying, okay, we've got some kimberlite here. We've got some kimberlite here. We've got some kimberlite here. That's K1, K2, K3. Now, all of these are on the craton. But only which one of these is actually going to be diamond bearing? And I want you to look at this for a second. I really want you to do this. Which one is going to be diamond bearing? So lock it in. Is it 1, 2, or 3? Tap below once you've locked it in, or whatever the TikTok things say. Anyway, well, it actually is number 2. And why isn't it number 1? Now, number 3 seems to be coming up, not having the mantle keel. Okay, it's got something else going on. This is the mobile zone probably. And so it's not going to have any. But why doesn't K1 have any? And the reason why is K1 just didn't pass through that area that actually had the diamonds. Just because it can have diamonds in that area doesn't mean it's going to have diamonds in that area. So you literally could have 2 kimberlite pipes right freaking next to each other, and only one of them is going to have diamonds in it. And that is completely dependent on the randomness of the diamond bearing areas in the lithospheric mantle. Well, when we're looking on the continental craton, so now we're like, okay, Clifford, he said that we need to be on the craton, the Archean craton. Let's go. But I just said that not every single one of them is going to have it. Well, the first thing you have to do is you find the craton, and then you have to go look for those kimberlite pipes. And one of the ways that you can go look for those kimberlite pipes is you can look for areas that get eroded easily. Kimberlites are really weak in terms of how well they stand up to weathering. And so a lot of times you're going to have lower areas or lakes and ponds, because that's where the lower area is going to be. The other thing that you want to look for is those indicator minerals. We've talked about these indicator minerals that are more abundant in the kimberlite than the diamonds are. So the diamonds are abundant in the kimberlite, not abundant, excuse me. They're not abundant in the kimberlite. So you go looking for something that is to lead you to where they are. But even then, even with all of these things going on, you just basically have to pray for diamonds, because it is not easy to find a diamondiferous diamond pipe that is got enough diamonds in it to actually make it worth all of the time you spent looking for the thing. So that leads us to a kind of a fun story with Canadian diamonds. So one of the interesting things is that from the time that De Beers consolidated everything down in the Kimberley region with the big hole and started this giant diamond company, this diamond mining, buying diamond rough, all of that stuff company, they dominated the rough diamond industry for 100 years. And they were a monopoly. They weren't even allowed to have a physical presence in the United States because they were in a monopoly, and we have very strong antitrust legislation here. So in 1990, De Beers was basically, if you had a diamond mine, De Beers bought the diamonds from you, and that was the only person you could sell to. And so anytime De Beers heard about another area that might have a diamond or something like that, they would go and they would try to either find the diamonds themselves and stake claims on those areas, or they would talk to the people who did find them and buy them out. So in the 1980s, in the early 1990s, there were these two geologists that were named Fipke and Bluson. Now, this is a time period where the northern part of Canada is being mapped geologically, and people are realizing that there is Archean craton up there, and they're realizing that, oh my goodness, there are kimberlites up here. We found just one or two of them, right? So we know that there's some kimberlites up here. And the first couple they found didn't have any, weren't diamondiferous. So it was like, we didn't find anything yet. And basically, what happens is De Beers hears about this. They go and start looking, but they are looking in the wrong places. Okay. The thing that they're used to is they're used to those diamonds and those indicator minerals being concentrated in the rivers. The problem with Canada, northern Canada, is it was covered under 2 miles of ice 12,000 years ago, and that messed everything up and it smeared all of the stuff all around it. Now, De Beers wasn't thinking that through. And Fipke and Bluson were like, wait a minute, we need to be looking for different stuff. And so instead of looking for the rivers and the indicator minerals, they actually started looking for circular lakes. Going back to that idea that as that ice was coming across Canada, it was digging out anything that was soft, like the kimberlite. And through this, they actually beat De Beers to finding the richest kimberlite pipes that had been found in 50 years. They discovered these gorgeous diamondiferous pipes in the Northwest Territories, and this is kind of the area in which they are. They actually have found more than 400 kimberlite pipes around what is the Diavik mine, which was the first one that they find. Out of those 400 pipes, only six are high enough grade to mine. However, out of those six, they produced 23 million carats in 1 year. And that was $2.6 billion of money that came into Canada because of those. Canada is the seventh highest producer by value and the fifth highest, excuse me, by volume and the fifth highest by value. Now, it is not easy to work clear up here above the Arctic Circle or very close to the Arctic Circle. Basically, these mines are surrounded by hundreds of small lakes, and each one of these lakes is not a kimberlite pipe, okay? There's only some of them that are going to be kimberlite pipes. Basically, you can only get there by air, or they create an ice road to actually move heavy things because they can't bring them in economically through air. And so it's only open for 2 months a year, and it's this ice road that they just drive across. And that just is so crazy. But even with those problems, the Ikati and the Diavik mines that are up there are some of the best run and the most lucrative diamond mines in the world. Now, they're not the best, there are other ones, but they're really, really good. And one of the things that they do that is very attractive to a lot of consumers is this idea of doing this ethically. So in Canada, this is a very developed nation, has very strict environmental and fair label laws. They actually are very interested in having good relationships with Indigenous people. And so they are actually helping Indigenous people go to college and come back and work here if they want to, or go work other places. They are really incorporating the ways that the Indigenous people feel about the land into the way that they are exploring more. Canada doesn't fund terrorism or conflict, okay? Duh. But, there's a lot of places that have mines that do, diamond mines that do. And Canadian diamonds are marketed as specifically Canadian diamonds. They say, hey, these are traceable. We're going to pull it out of this mine. And when we cut it and give it to you, you know exactly where it came from. That is not true for any other diamonds in the world right now. All those other diamonds, they just get lumped together as a diamond. But these ones are traceable by origin. And they all will have some kind of cute little, maple leaf or something that says that they are Canadian diamonds so that you know that that's what you're getting. Now, all of this comes with a markup, right? There is an expense to ethical mining. It can be as much as 20% markup. So, for example, this is a round 1 carat that I found. It's from Canada. We know where it's from. It's VVS2, sorry, VVS2, excellent, F color, all of this stuff. And this particular one is almost $9,000. Whereas this one that has the exact same numbers, but we don't know where it came from, is worth almost $2,000 less. So there is an expense to ethical mining. However, it's an expense that a lot of people are willing to pay because they don't have to worry about a lot of the same problems with diamonds as other people can find. So, what are some of those problems with diamonds? Well, you've probably all heard of blood diamonds. All right. Blood diamonds are diamonds that are actually funding conflict. So, they're the ones that like people are selling and then killing other people with the money they get from it. Blood diamonds, conflict diamonds. This has become a really big deal since the 90s. And so in 2003, they established the diamond market, the everybody who's buying and selling diamonds, established a protocol. And it was called the Kimberley Process Certification Scheme. And basically it says we will not buy diamonds and then sell diamonds from any place that is using the that money to create conflict. Okay. We're not going to buy diamonds from rebel movements that are undermining legitimate governments. And so the industries all say, okay, we're only going to buy Kimberly processed diamonds. Well, it's a lovely idea, but it absolutely is not working. It's largely ineffective. It doesn't address any other problems. It doesn't address any environmental problems. It doesn't address child labor, violence in mines, et cetera, et cetera. And it doesn't prevent people selling conflict diamonds through a middleman and swearing that they're not conflict diamonds. So not very useful there. There's a lot of criticism. It says, proven ineffective at doing the one job it was created to do. And so conflict diamonds is still a thing. That's a possibility. We're trying to be better at it, but we're not really that great. All right. So for the last 5, 6 minutes, I'm going to talk about how diamonds have been marketed since we first discovered that we could be pulling a lot of them out of the ground with the discovery of kimberlite. I want you guys to think for a second. Can you think of a slogan, an ad slogan that that has stuck with you? Maybe it's just do it for Nike, or maybe it's, I can't think, Red Bull gives you wings. I don't know. Stuff like that. Okay. So advertising slogans are a really big deal. Well, there's one advertising slogan that is associated with diamonds. So I want to think for a second. Can you come up with that? In the 1940s, there was a woman named Frances Garrity, and she worked at an advertising firm in New York City. And she was given roles. She was given the accounts of different merchandising to create ads for that were like appropriate for women. So like we're talking about washing machines. You can go make an ad campaign for a washing machine, but not a car because you're a woman, right? That kind of thing. Well, jewelry kind of fell into that area, and she was asked to create an ad campaign for jewelry, specifically for De Beers diamonds. And so she's like, the way the story is told is she's like in bed one night and she's thinking about it, and something suddenly comes to her mind, and so she scribbles it down. And the next day she comes in with it and she says, here it is. And everybody that she tells it to is like, huh? What does that even mean? Like, and that's not even grammatically correct. But, it's just for the little women. And so we don't really care. Go ahead and run with it. And it gets used anyway. And this becomes the most popular slogan of the 20th century. They did a study right near the end of the 20th century, and there was no other one that was as recognizable as this one. So have you figured out what it is? It's a diamond is forever. So this actually, and the very, very hard push of advertising diamonds means that diamond sales in the United States go from 23 million to 2.1 billion by 1980. And then it's even larger than that. It's been disrupted by synthetic diamonds, so it's kind of hard to look at numbers now. But diamond sales in the United States skyrocketed. Now, this is all because De Beers was willing to pay an ad company to create an ad campaign, and then they were relentless with it. You opened up a magazine, there was a De Beers ad that said a diamond is forever. You watched something on TV, you listened to the radio, whatever it is in the newspaper, you saw ads for De Beers diamonds. So let's talk a little bit about De Beers. From the 1890s to the 1900s, De Beers commanded 80% of the world trade in rough diamonds, all right? And then pretty much that other 20% ended up in De Beers anyway. It just kind of was shady how it got there. So essentially, it was the only place to buy rough diamond material. You could not buy it anywhere else wholesale. Like you could buy it from somebody who bought it from De Beers, but that meant there was a markup, right? And they controlled it so tightly. Okay. If you wanted to be able to buy rough diamonds, let's say you're an up and coming gem cutter, you want to be able to buy some rough diamonds so you can cut them and make them into the dream that you have in your mind, you had to get a literal invitation from De Beers to come to one of their events. And they would have like 3 and 5 a year or something like that. And basically, what they did is they took all of the diamonds that they bought from people all over the world, they mixed them all together, and they would make these little packets, okay? These little parcels. And you would come in and you would show your invitation. You'd be taken to a small room. You would be handed a parcel. You could look at the parcel, but you only had two choices. You could either take it or you could leave it. You could not say, well, I wanted a bigger parcel, or I wanted less of these giant diamonds, or I wanted fewer of these colored ones, or whatever it is. You couldn't do that. There was no negotiating, there was no swapping things out. It was either you paid them or you didn't, and you didn't get anything. And if you said no too many times, eventually you would stop getting the invitation. Now, this was hard, but this was okay for a lot of people because De Beers had such a tight grip on the rough diamond market that diamond prices were always going up and never going down. And that's not natural for commodities. They go up, they go down, things happen, right? So, so a lot of people were willing to play along with De Beers. And then an interesting thing happens, and that is the fall of the Soviet Union. All right, let's go and talk about the Soviets a little bit. Okay, remember how many diamonds the Russians have? Lots and lots and lots of diamonds, right? So, and the thing that De Beers would do is De Beers would buy a certain amount of your rough diamonds from you, and they would pay you super good for it. But they wouldn't buy all of them, and you weren't allowed to sell them to anybody else. So you just kind of had to stockpile them. All right. And that was what Russia the Soviet Union had been doing. So they had all these stockpiles. Well, in 1991, we have the Soviet Union falls. And all of a sudden, we have all of these smaller states. We have Russia, and we have Belarus, and we have Ukraine, and we have the Latvia, and Lithuania, all those things. We're no longer the Soviet Union. We're just little places. And Russia needs money. And Russia has diamonds. But De Beers is like, whoa, if you tried to sell us all those diamonds, we'd flood the market. No, wait, no, 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 no. We're not taking them. We'll take what we always take, okay? And Russia says, okay. And they start selling diamonds as industrial diamonds where they're fully gem quality diamonds, okay? They essentially end up flooding the market. And De Beers is like, wait, you have a contract with us. You can't do that. And Russia said, what are you going to do about it? Plus, that contract was with the Soviet Union. They don't exist anymore. So here we go. We can do whatever we feel like. Millions and millions of carats flood the market. It was a good time to buy diamonds. Unfortunately, I was in high school and did not have money, so I wasn't buying diamonds then. During this same period of time, the discovery and the production of diamonds in Canada is going on. And all over the place, people like Phipps and Blouson, the people who found the first ones in Canada, they said, we're not going to sell out to De Beers. We're going to do this ourselves. Everybody else starts realizing, hey, wait a minute. You broke your contract with De Beers. I can break my contract with De Beers. So places like Rio Tinto and BHP and Argyle and Alrosa, all these places just start breaking all of their contracts. They're like, you're a monopoly. We don't want to deal with you. We're going to stop. And so essentially what happens is that from a high in the 1980s, in 1987, 80% of all the rough production and purchases goes all the way down to 2020. De Beers market share is 23% in value. And in just that period of time, De Beers no longer is the controlling person in rough diamonds. And you can read all of this stuff. It's kind of fun to read it through, but whatever. So today, buying diamond rough is extremely different, all right? They call this true market prices. De Beers is not bolstering it up, is not shoving it up to make it be more expensive than it is. You can go to a tender, which is a silent auction, or an auction, just like a regular auction. You can bid on what you want. You can buy what you want. You only have to buy it when you want it. Prices are transparent. They'll actually have like piles that are like, you can buy this whole pile. Or you can buy one of these little hero stones. Anything that's like above 7 carats is considered a hero stone. This is amazing and awesome. One of the cons to it is it's created a lot of price volatility. If you buy a diamond one day, tomorrow the price may be higher, but it also may be lower. And that makes it less likely for lending companies, banks, and things like that to actually want to back you if you're going to go buy diamonds. So it's harder to get loans to buy diamonds because they are not as steady as they once were. This means that big rich companies can actually buy more because they have more buying power. So there's pros and cons to everything. And going to the true market prices means there's a heck of a lot more volatility. Now, diamond prices are very different than a lot of other prices for things that we mine. For example, gold. It really doesn't matter if you have five 1 ounce gold coins or 1 5 ounce gold bar. They're going to be exactly the same price. And if you buy it in Winnipeg or you buy it in Johannesburg, it literally does not matter because it's going to be the same price. That's not true for diamonds. There's no universal price per for diamonds, okay? And so it's kind of an interesting thing that there are actually companies out there who keep track of everybody who is buying diamonds and selling diamonds. And they set out these reports and they have these websites that you can then go in and look and see how much diamonds should be selling for. And they are worth like thousands of dollars. Like to get a subscription to one of these guys, it's a couple of $1,000s a year. So BYU does not have a subscription to that. We find other ways to figure out our diamonds, which we will share with you when we do our diamond appraisal lab in a couple of more weeks. All right, there's some vocabulary for you. Thanks so much and have a great day. We'll see you guys later.